have quorum. Thank you, Holly.
You bet.
Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of Eugene Police Commission. Today is Thursday, February 13th, 2025. I'm Chair Jensina Hawkins, and we have some commissioners that are still joining via Zoom, it looks like. Thank you so much for pivoting and allowing the flexibility for us to meet via Zoom this evening with tonight's weather and with the flu going around town and taking everybody out. It's nice to have this option to meet virtually. This evening, I wanted to start by saying a huge farewell to Councillor Alan Zelenka. He has been reassigned by the mayor, and so he is no longer with the police commission. I don't know what assignment they gave him, but we have a fantastic welcome for Councillor Randy Groves, who is now one of our city council liaisons. Randy or Jennifer, do you happen to know where Zelenka got reassigned? Not that it matters, I suppose.
I don't. I know there was a shuffle and several assignments got changed amongst council, which is not unusual.
Yeah, I think he ended up on a regional public safety type
Nice.
board or commission or advisory group of some kind.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll definitely wish him farewell. We're appreciative of his 5 years of service working with the police commission, and welcome to Councillor Groves. So we'll begin this evening with reviewing and approving the agenda. There's 2 edits I'd like to make to tonight's agenda, and after I list them, I'll look to Vice Chair to make a motion. One of them is we have Mark Gissner, the city independent police auditor, who has a comment to make for us, and so I'd like to insert that before liaison comments this evening. The other change I'd like to make is to swap 2 of our policy reviews. So we have 2 policies to review tonight. One of them is welfare checks. One of them is the drone policy. And Sergeant Williams needs to leave earlier this evening to deal with some family things. And so I'd like to swap the order of those 2 policy reviews so that Sergeant Williams can participate with us.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Rady. And all in favor of making those changes to the agenda, please say aye. We have a whole bunch of ayes. Any opposed, please say no. Okay, no, nothing, no one against, so that passes. For our previous meeting recap, we actually had a very productive meeting last month. We received an update on the culture audit from Chief Skinner. The Chief Skinner was very clear in renaming the audit. We had previously referred to it as a cultural audit, and he reminded us that it's a culture audit. So we received that update as well as some of the action items that Chief Skinner and EPD will be working on. We passed a motion to encourage and support efforts for Eugene Police Department to engage a mental health professional. We passed another resolution to approve the communications with persons and with persons with disabilities policy number 370 with the thoughtful edits made by the police commission and the experts that Sergeant Barong brought to us. We also passed a motion to approve the strikes and labor disputes policy with the updates that Sergeant Barong and Sergeant Jordan made for us. That was policy 313. And we received a drone video and demonstration from Sergeant Kyle Williams. We'll move into reviewing the January 2025 minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented to us in our packet?
I'll move to do that.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Ye, seconded by Vice Chair Shivers. Any discussion regarding the minutes? Councillor Groves?
I'm assuming since I wasn't here for the meeting, I should abstain from the vote.
You are welcome to abstain. You can also make a vote that has no bearing on it as well, if you want.
Okay.
All right, all in favor of passing the minutes as presented to us in the packet, please say aye. Show of hands, thank you. Any opposed, please say nay. I see no opposition. Any abstentions? That would be Councillor Groves. Did we lose Commissioner Parham? I know that they were traveling and were concerned a little bit about the connectivity during that.
It looks
Sorry, it looks like we did lose him. Hopefully they will join back on.
Okay. All right. The minutes for January 2025 pass. And so now we'll go into the update from our independent police auditor, Mark Kistner. We can't hear you, Mark. Still can't hear you. Not yet. If you want to change your audio to phone, you can call in if that works better for you. We can see your lips moving, but we can't hear anything. So I'll move into the rest of the liaison reports and we'll come back to you, Mark, if you want to call in or see what else we can do for audio to get you connected. So for our liaisons, we are missing Dr. Silky Booker again, and we'll go to Commissioner Clay Neal then for CRB.
Sure, we had our civilian review board meeting on Tuesday, and we covered a training topic, which was actually just an update on the hiring process for the independent police auditor position. So I don't know if Auditor Gissner was going to update on us on that himself, but his role as a sort of transitional role will end at the end of April, and city council folks may have updates to this process, but currently they are in the process of interviewing candidates or scheduling interviews for candidates for the permanent role. And there are hopes to have that permanent role filled by, I think, April, although I'm not sure of all the specifics. There will be a process for community engagement in that hiring process where there will be a panel of folks and who will participate in every candidate interview to some degree. So if there were 3 candidates, there would be 3 sort of sessions for that community panel to participate in. And my assumption is that folks from the police commission would be asked to participate in addition to many other community groups. So it'll be made up of community groups that the city reaches out to in advance of the interview process. So just something to be aware of. And if you are interested in that process, you might want to let me know or the current interim auditor know, or your city councilor know that you would be interested on representing your community. The other major thing that we did was review a case, a closed investigation into a sort of high active, what was it? There were many police officers involved in the search and seizure process because there was an individual who was menacing, who was alleged to be menacing other folks and involved in domestic violence with a gun. And so there was a case where many police officers were involved, and the charges that were associated with that case had to be dropped because of mishandling of evidence. And so we reviewed the allegations associated with that mishandling of evidence, including a truthfulness allegation on a police officer. And it was an interesting case with different adjudications from different members, including some differences between the auditor and the chief. So we had a sort of lively conversation about the fine line between some of the allegations that were investigated and how you evaluate outcomes from that investigation. Anyway, it's a recorded meeting, so you can see those fine lines. I'm trying to speak sort of broadly because it was a big meeting, lots of discussion. In the end, what I do want to communicate is that we all kind of, I think, agreed that all of the police officers engaged were trying to do the right thing. And there is a lot of there are many moving targets with regard to search and seizure policy based on case law, and it's a hard training topic. And so we talked about some policy implications for search and seizure, but it's often changing, and based on new cases that are in the court system currently. And so many other people in the room here could talk more about that specifically than I can, but it seemed like there weren't necessarily policy implications that we wanted to recommend, but that it is something to be aware of as a challenge that police officers face in the field.
All right, thank you for that comprehensive update. I'll have to look for that recording. And I would imagine that there are several of us who would love to be involved in that selection process. Um, let me see here. Mark, do you have audio yet?
I see that there's a phone number in the attendees, and I wonder if that's you, Mark. It ends with 242 extension. I hate to push them over to a panelist if it's not him, but if he's calling in. Maybe we do a thumb.
Anyone have Mark's number and know that it ends in a 242?
I don't think it does end in a 4242.
Is that your number, Mark? Does it end with 242?
Holly,
Thumbs up,
can you send
thumb-
him a chat? A
It
chat
actually
message?
does end in a 242, sorry.
Yes,
Let's
his number,
promote him.
and that is his number.
Okay, I'm going to promote him to.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure what's happening. I have asked to unmute, so I'm not sure why it's not working. Shoot, okay. We'll try, we'll keep trying.
Okay, you're unmuted now, Mark. Let's try that. No, we still don't have you. Interesting. Okay, we will move to City Council liaison updates. And we'll begin with you, Councilor Groves. And if you could provide just a brief intro, I know it's hard to do because you're the man who has done everything and been everywhere. But let us know who you are and how lucky we are to have you.
Well, that's kind of a tall order. First of all, I'm happy to be here. I've always been interested in our police department. My background is I spent almost 37 years as a firefighter here in our community. My last 10 years was as chief of department, but along the way, I also had 10 years as an IAFF Local 851 principal officer. So I've been on both sides of the table. I've seen our police officers at work many, many times, and I've also had the opportunity to see other police agencies at work as well. And in fact, I've had my backside pulled out of problems a few times on calls by our police department. So again, I have a very favorable opinion of them, but at the same time, I understand the role that we have here as a police commission, and making sure that we bring a community eye to the work, but also help explain things back to our community. I've had, let's see, I just started my second term in office. So I'm continuing looking for ways to serve our community. I also served on the budget committee before I became a counselor. My council ward is Ward 8, which is southwest Eugene. And we've had a number of issues out here in our area. So I've continued to work with our police department. My current council assignments are this. I'm on the LCOG Board of Directors and the Executive Steering Committee, Cascade West Economic Development District Board and Steering Committee. I was on Human Services Commission just before this assignment. Also on MPC, which is the Metropolitan Policy Committee, which deals with transportation issues. Number of other assignments I've had, plus ad hoc. I'm on the fire governance panel, where we're looking at taking the way we administer our fire department to a different model. And I was also the chief when we merged the Eugene and Springfield Fire Department. So I was heavily involved in that and looking for ways to not only improve surge capacity and safety for our community and our firefighters, but also reduce costs. It saves about $2.5 million a year. that's kind of my background. I've also had experience coaching baseball, playing baseball, and like working with youth.
Awesome.
Sounds like we
All
have
right.
Mark back too.
Yes, I'm glad to hear it. Mark, I think we have you now.
I think so too.
Yay, there you were.
Okay. Hope I'm not going to box out anything anymore here. Sorry about the technology failings. It's been a while. The reason it was important I make a statement is last month, y'all talked about the McWilliams case. I think it was Mr. Parham that had brought that to your attention. And what I was going to say last month, but I couldn't get in, was the fact that we are not going to bring any allegations forward against the officers in that particular arrest. With reference to discussing it, I'm not going to discuss it anymore because he still has court processes going on. But I can, what I can say for sure is that there will not be any allegations brought forward against the officers.
From the auditor's office, is that correct?
Pardon me?
From the auditor's office.
Right. It's our responsibility to classify allegations. I classified it as an incident review, reviewed all the body-worn camera and in-car video and audio and video from the jail, and we are not going to be bringing forward any allegations against the officers.
All right, thank you for that update.
You're welcome.
Councilor Ye, liaison update from City Council.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I think last month I spoke really briefly on our budget, our ongoing budget situation. So I have an update on that. Council passed the fire services fee in our last meeting that will cover a large amount of the current budget gap, but not all of it. So while that puts the police department and other departments in a better situation, there are still an additional $3.5 million dollars in cuts that will need to be done. So that's where we are on that. And I think Commissioner Neal did an excellent job of bringing us up to speed on the auditor. I actually have anything to add, unless Randy remembers how many people made it through. I think there were 12, but it could have been 13 that made it through to the first round of phone interviews that are going to happen, that are going to be done by the employment department, not council personally. Does that sound right, Randy?
That sounds about right. I'm still catching up on emails. I'm just back from 2 weeks in Mexico, and I had some connectivity problems down there, so I feel your pain, Mark.
Yeah. It was just over 10. So
yeah, that sounds about right, though.
You're not supposed to be trying to connect to work when you're on vacation in Mexico.
He always usually joins us for one meeting at least while he's down there, so he can brag.
I would probably do the same. All right, thank you, liaisons. We'll move to commissioner comments. This evening, I actually wanted to kick it off with a thank you to EPD for helping shut down the burglary ring that was targeting the households of Asian business owners. And also thank you to Chief Skinner and to Chief Shearer from Springfield Police Department, who came to a public safety forum for individuals of Asian American, Pacific, and Indian descent to talk about different resources available to the community and the efforts that EPD and SPD have been doing. And we're grateful to see that that's hopefully drawing to a close and will hopefully not be as much of a problem anymore. Vice Chair Shivers.
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for being here tonight. I'm very concerned about budgetary concerns regarding the department. It's it's always a bad idea to underfund your social services, no matter what those services are. I would also like to echo a recurring anxiety that I've heard throughout the community, which is with the recent election and the potential for more ICE raids and concentration camps for our neighbors. So I will be doing everything I can to ensure that EPD does not participate in this sort of Nazi bullshit, frankly. So thank you all.
Sergeant Jordan, not to put you on the spot, but at some point, if there is a policy, I know Oregon is a sanctuary state, so there are state guidelines regarding what local law enforcement can and cannot do to assist with the efforts of ICE. But if there's anything in particular regarding EPD and federal immigration officials, that may be something that we want to bring up at our next meeting.
Okay, I can look into that.
Thank you very much.
Can I
Council,
add something to that?
absolutely. By the way, welcome, acting in capacity Chief Jake Birch.
Thanks. Yeah, I just would like to just let the commissioners know that there is a policy on it, and Sergeant Jordan can bring it forward. There's also city ordinances that are very comprehensive in what law enforcement can and cannot participate in relation to immigration. So both of those we abide by. So
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
if I
Councilor
can,
Groves? Oh, Vice Chair.
sorry. I just wanted to add on that, yeah, this is not the first time we've gone through these and had these discussions, and EPD was very accessible,
Yeah.
you know, what, 8 years ago now?
Councilor Groves?
Thank you, Chair. Chief Burke covered a lot of what I was going to say. There is an ordinance in place. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor Ye, but wasn't it 2018 it was enacted, that basically puts a firewall between police and local police and ICE. And then I also talked to our city attorney trying to get a better understanding of this. And there really is no legal definition for sanctuary city. I mean, it's more if you're calling yourself that and then the policies you put into place. But we're technically not a sanctuary city only because there isn't a definition for that. But we've got the mechanisms in place that don't make us part of the immigration enforcement.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Parham?
No comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Rady?
I'm afraid I have a comment, and it derives from both last meeting and from it was directly addressed by Auditor Gisner tonight. And that is, there was a sharing during commissioners' remarks last month that raised questions about this very case that Auditor Gisner spoke of. And the remarks that were made were not evidence-based. They were based on discussions going on outside of official circles as to what had taken place. And we have in Eugene robust and redundant systems to deal with officer misconduct. They were put in place after lots of difficulties, and the public pushed them and got them done. And they have had the effects that we would hope they would have. That does not mean that it is not possible in Eugene for there to be inappropriate officer violence against residents, and again, particularly against residents of color. I have spent my entire adult life active on this very question, and I just want to say
When these remarks were made last meeting, everyone looked at the table. No one spoke about them. No one else responded. And I just have to say that from my perspective, one of the most destructive things we can do in the fight to restrain inappropriate use of force by police is to make charges without evidence. This has happened before repeatedly here and many other places, and it only makes the struggle against this harder. And when it is made in the context of the police commission, it gives it extra credibility. And I would just beg other commissioners, before making comments on a situation, make sure all the facts are in. And if the facts point to serious police misconduct, then we should all stand up and shout. And if they don't, let's not. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Rady, and I definitely appreciate the attention of Mr. Gissner to come into the meeting this evening and address that specific concern. We don't, that's not a luxury that we should get used to having, but it was very nice to have that specifically addressed this evening. Commissioner Neal.
No comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a little different take on it. I think that commissioners can come to the commission and just say, hey, this happened in the community, and maybe it was my constituency, and this happened, and people are upset, and people want to know what happened. And I think that's appropriate. And my response at the last meeting was to say, let the auditor do the work, and then it will be appropriate, and we'll find out what happened. But I really felt. I'm feeling, and I'm not defending, I'm not here to defend Commissioner Parham, who may have dropped off. He's not showing on they're not showing on my screen right now. But it seems like if I were them and the interim auditor comes on tonight and just announces there's nothing, he doesn't say, hey, we really listened, we watched, we looked. He did say that at the end. But he didn't come on and say that. He just said there was nothing. It's nothing, and we didn't do anything. And you talked about this last meeting, and that just deflated me. That was, I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to pass on these comments, but I don't come to the meeting and I'm feeling empathy for the community that was upset about what happened. And I hadn't watched the tape, and it's not appropriate to make comments. Maybe I do have an opinion about the commissioner and the comments that were made, but a commissioner can come, if there's an attack on my constituency, I'm going to come here and say, hey, I want this investigated. So that's all. And I'm not, I appreciate that the interim auditor's here, that we got the report, but I would have preferred that to have come in a different flavor. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner Lyman. Councilor Groves.
No comment really at this point. I do appreciate the auditor coming in and presenting his findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ye.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to commend our department. There was a barricaded individual in my ward in the last couple of days. Not sure if it made it on the news. I've been very busy and not watching a lot of news, but very scary situation, could have been much worse. And it came to a peaceful conclusion after a lot of patience and a lot of professionalism. And even with patience and professionalism, sometimes things don't go the way we would like, and that doesn't mean people did a bad job. But in this case, everything went well. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the people involved, keeping my neighborhood safe. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. It's come to my attention, we have a substitution for Commissioner Dr. Booker this evening. John Bradley, I understand you're representing Human Rights Commission this evening. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And so is this a temporary replacement?
Yes, I'm just filling in.
Okay, thank you. What update can you bring us from Human Rights Commission?
Well, as you mentioned before, we had been tracking the mentioned crime ring that was targeting Asian families in town, and so appreciate the update there. We're also working on a recommendation on weather protocols for camping removal. That's, of course, an issue from our housing area. We're concerned about that. I think those are the only, we have, of course, a robust work plan, but those are the only things that I wanted to make mention of tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for providing that and for being here this evening. I appreciate you joining us. Okay. And so then because Chief Skinner is away, as is Deputy Chief Adams, we have acting in capacity of Jake Burke, who will be delivering the chief's report for us this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry we couldn't be in person. This is my first time attending. I thought I would probably just give kind of an intro to myself. I can't hold a candle to Councilor Groves, but so I'm only been in Eugene for about 10 months now. But I've been in law enforcement for about 29 years. Started in Monmouth Police Department in 1995, and then went to Salem Police Department in 1998. Worked mostly operational during my time there, was in patrol for a great period of time, and then about 16 years of my career was spent in the investigations division. I ultimately left Salem as a deputy chief and had the opportunity to work with a similar type as the police commission with the advisory council to the chief, and doing a lot of policy review and overhaul while I was at Salem, and then some also in the 10 months since I've been here. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to sit in for Chief Skinner in his absence. Actually, the burglary ring was the big update that I was gonna talk about, but we've already talked about that. So I'm just real proud of the work that continually got done that we couldn't talk about to the public. But one thing that we are striving to be better at is our communication with our Asian community members. And I know we've reached out to all the victims, and then I've asked to reach out to some Asian leaders in the community to be able to message what we are doing behind the scenes. So I just wanted to talk about that. And I don't really have any other updates from the chief.
Okay. We had received an email update from Chief Skinner regarding the homeless sweeps that were happening with the cold weather, as far as is it an exemption that's granted during extreme weather events that is supposed to halt some of that sweep activity? And Chief Skinner also addressed some of the allegations that were made in an email that we received from Black Thistle Street Aid. So we will go into the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Subcommittee update. Commissioner Rady.
Okay, we did not hold a meeting yet since the last commission meeting. We had to put off our meeting because we couldn't get everybody to the session. It will be on the 18th. I can, however, report that there seems to be a lot of progress being made. I have pulled together the policies from Seattle, Portland, Bend, and Salem and analyzed them. Each one focuses in one particular direction, though Bend and Salem are relatively close to each other and closer to our needs, I think. All of this has pointed to, one, the need for a policy, the need for, I think, an organization within the department specifically focused on health and wellness, and I'm covering both mental and physical health and wellness. Preferably one person in charge of the program, coordinated. The program itself, that consists of many different aspects, including the peer support and resiliency team, stress relief programs, an on-site mental health professional, referral network, education, and auditing of the program to see that it's working right and finding ways to improve it. There are a lot of questions we're going to have to deal with, choices that will have to be made, and I will try and keep, if it's appropriate, I will try and keep the whole commission up to date with what we're doing, what we're coming up with, so you'll be ready when Sergeant Jordan hopefully brings in some policy. We met together, and I've also met with the head of the union, and I've spoken with lieutenants from several other departments on this, and everybody, and I've talked to the chief about it, and everybody is singing largely, well, we're on the same key. The melody is not exactly the same, but I don't think it's going to be impossible for us to have policy to present to this commission before the subcommittee's term expires. That's pretty much what I got. And we'll have something for you after the 18th.
Thank you, Commissioner Rady. And it was me. I was the problem. I was the one that wasn't going to be able to make it, so we couldn't have quorum. So that's why we had to move the meeting.
If there's anyone else who would like to join the subcommittee, I think we could use about another person. So if you have an interest, let Jensina know.
Thank you for that. All right, we'll go into reviewing the drone team policy 908, and there was an appendix to it, 908A. We are joined again this evening by Sergeant Kyle Williams, who last meeting brought the nifty suitcase full of drone equipment. It was actually kind of neat. We got to watch that video of the capabilities of the drones and how they are being leveraged to save some resources for EPD man hours. So let me go to page, goodness gracious. Normally I have these tabbed. All right. Nope, that was the welfare check that we just moved down. So the agenda item is to continue the review of policy 908 drone team and policy 908 drone team appendix A. During the January 9, 2025 Police Commission meeting, the Commission received a presentation about the department's drone team as first responders. Drone Team Sergeant Kyle Williams provided a presentation on how the drone team operates as first responders and answered questions the Commission had. At the time, Police Commission also requested to review policy 908 drone team and policy 908 drone team appendix A. They were last reviewed and updated on April 24th, 2019. And May 13 of 2021. Sergeant Williams, to kick off this discussion, could you provide some overview of things that have possibly changed or been updated since this policy was last reviewed?
Do you mean any policy changes that were done? Like if we did any policy reviews since the last time Police Commission actually saw it?
Yes, that, as well as anything that is actually in effect but not yet on paper.
This policy is original back to the one that was recommended by Police Commission on the last back when we initially initiated it back in 2019. Trying to think of the other. I don't believe there really is anything. I mean, our procedural side has adjusted a little bit. I think I explained before that the 908A came later because we were really kind of establishing what that procedural side needed to look like at the time. We definitely have some changes that need to be made, and we're going to be looking to make some policy changes as this year is looking to be a big year from a FAA regulatory and Oregon law standpoint. And so there certainly are some things. The problem is with some of that, we just don't know what they're going to be yet. And so I would have a whole list of recommendations probably, I'm hoping by August or September, but some of those things we just don't quite know yet.
Can you answer a question for me? I've actually always wondered, and I'm guessing the answer is really simple, and it'll be embarrassing once you explain it to me. Why, when a drone is in the air, does it, say for firefighting response or anything like that, so why does it ground the other flights? You always see things about, well, there was a helicopter or somebody that was going to be helping with things, but somebody was flying a drone, so they couldn't. And then now because of that, the forest fire took off, or these other things happened. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, the problem comes when you have unknown aircraft, other unknown aircraft, and it's the safety to the crewed aviation that's in the sky at that time. It isn't just a flat out, if drones are in the air, crewed aviation can't fly. It's that those drones that are operating need to be coordinated and in communication with other aviation crews that are in the area. So there are oftentimes events where crewed and uncrewed systems are being utilized, but if you can't identify and communicate with the drone pilot at the time, then you just don't know what they're doing, and the safety to the crewed airplane or helicopter really takes precedent, and they can't risk having a crash or other issues.
In the city of Eugene, is the altitude of the drones that EPD uses, is that ever likely to conflict with any other aircraft?
No, we follow FAA regulations, and in fact, FAA allows us to fly up to 400 feet above structures. We don't fly above 400 feet, period, even if we are over the top of the structure. We don't have structures in Eugene that are tall enough to really cause us an altitude issue from that standpoint. So we adhere to the 400-foot altitude. The only place where we don't is in the UAS facilities maps, which is in the Class D airspace of EUG, and those altitudes actually go down and give you a hard deck that's even lower than that 400 foot. The beyond visual line of sight waiver that we've applied for, and I'm hoping to get soon, which again will be a big policy point issue. That will actually give us a fairly hard deck at 200. Potentially up to 250. So we actually see that our altitudes are going to be even lower, probably moving forward, in order to obtain that full beyond visual line of sight, which will allow us to get rid of that visual observer monitoring operations.
And I know that EPD usually has an officer stationed over at the municipal airport. Do you ever fly the drones? Do you ever have cause to send the drones over there?
We have a few times. We've had some incidents over there where we've needed to do some scene mapping or search and rescue efforts. We've got a great relationship with the FAA and air traffic control over at the airport. I make an effort to get over there and maintain communications with their management periodically. So we've got a pretty good two-way line of communication with them. Anytime we need help or we need airspace assistance to allow us to operate outside of our normal parameters, either utilizing the Systems Operations Support Center at the FAA for an SGI COA, Special Governmental Interest Certificate of Authorization, or directly with ATC to deconflict any air traffic. They're great to work with. They've been awesome.
What sort of questions does EPD receive from the community regarding privacy when there's EPD drones?
You know, everybody's concerned about privacy. I think I get fewer concerns about our police operations and more about people's curiosity or concern about just generally speaking drones, because I mean that certainly is a potential issue, and we've had a few of those. And the reality is that there aren't any real drone specific laws, and privacy is privacy, whether it's a drone or it's somebody putting up a camera or peeping over your fence. And so while it feels different, and it certainly does improve the access that somebody trying to spy, the laws really aren't any different, and they would apply the same way. On behalf of us, I mean, I feel like once we sort of explain what our mission set is, people understand what the tool is, what the Oregon revised statutes are, and how we apply our drone use. I feel like most of the time those questions go away. But of course, people are concerned about us randomly surveilling people. I mean, I'll tell you, we've got more than enough work. We don't have the time or the capacity, and a policy that says that we're not allowed to do that. And we take that very, very seriously. We would never want to have the risk or chance of any one potential incident that would put a black eye on us or the UAS adoption across the US. And so there really is I feel a big burden, because any new technology is going to get a lot of press. And if one person does something silly anywhere in the country, it certainly tarnishes and causes people to be concerned. And it really is a part of why we started the Law Enforcement Drone Association with the initial mantra was please don't screw this up, because we all recognize that this was a sensitive topic, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was doing it the right way, applying the laws and the rules, and kind of a governing body that would put pressure on folks to really take it seriously and adopt good standards and best practices.
Thank you. Commissioner Lyman, question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sergeant Williams. It was informative last month. It seems like a good program, supportive. I do have a question. In the appendix, it says one of the examples in the appendix is like for a pre-planned deployment, like a protest. So it's in the appendix that you may be launching the drones, like if there was a big thing at the federal courthouse downtown. And then I just go up to the policy and the probable cause standard, that I'm looking for I just had the site here, the 908.851, 908.8.5.1, drones shall only be operated. And I'm just wanting to understand how. I'm not opposed to the idea that you could have eyes up in the air at the protest at the federal courthouse. That's a legal protest, but would you get a warrant, or under what authority in the policy would that use of the drone be appropriate?
Yeah, certainly. Can I back you up just so that I can see exactly where you're on the 908A? Which section were you referring to there also? If you're muted.
I think
You're currently muted.
I'm
Commissioner
sorry.
Lyman.
I'm sorry. 908A.53.
I just found it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably
Yeah,
have a
so-
warrant for the SWAT, but you probably don't or you may do for the protest. So thanks.
Yeah, no, we had a lot of discussions around that. The reality is that a warrant, there really isn't a warrant path for a civil event. And so what we do is we set up and we stand by until we have a criminal action of some type. And that criminal action for protest is generally blocking of the streets. And then we will fly to observe while they're marching, blocking streets and doing other civil disobedience. And then as soon as it gets to a legal location, a park or something else, and things have stabilized and it looks like that portion of the event has ended, then we come back, we land again, and we wait to see what happens next. So we don't just do carte blanche observation. It would be nice to get to that point, because the situational awareness that our commanders and decision makers get about our resources and safety and traffic flows and other things really can be, it really is very helpful for the overall safety. It also allows us sometimes to have less, it allows us to just back off to some degree also, by being able to have a vantage point where we can still make sure things are being safe. But at this point, we do have to have some sort of a criminal activity. We wait for that point. We've had protests where we twiddle our thumbs on a rooftop because they stayed in one location and we didn't have that nexus. And we've had others where we've flown very, very long, continuous operations.
Right. And I appreciate that you might want that authority, but I really appreciate that you're respecting the authority that you have in the policy, and just to push it a little bit, because you gave an example last month where the person called in a car break-in, and that's a crime in progress. You might get there faster. But are you using a probable cause standard, like on dispatch? If someone says, like, an anonymous caller, there's a prowler, and within range of these things, will you deploy it? Does that meet the deployment standard?
Well, every call really is going to be nuanced. And I would say there are some areas where we probably do push that a little bit when it comes to a public, like a medical or a life-saving, the water rescues, and honestly, fires are a little dicey when it comes to what the ORS is, but the value to the public and the potential from like a criminal standpoint of spying and whatnot, I feel like that is overweighted by kind of the gray area that we are, that we can kind of be in there. But when it comes to the criminal side, we're pretty cautious about ensuring that we have what we feel like is reasonably solid footing for what a reasonable person would consider probable cause.
Mm.
So a vague allegation of a prowler without anything more, we probably wouldn't launch on. Somebody actually calling and saying, I think there's somebody on my property and I'm scared, absolutely we would go to that.
Okay, and we're doing policy review, so if there are things that you want that would help you in aiding the public, I mean, that's what we're here for. So thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and that
Councilor-
really comes down to the ORS, and so I wish it was a policy discussion that you all could help us massage that. It really comes down to the legislative process, and that's where this session will hopefully be beneficial for us.
Councilor Groves?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Sergeant Williams, for the explanation on this. I find it very interesting. I'm assuming on a civil protest, if you're up in the air, you're also looking for threats that might be posed against the protesters as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We're monitoring and looking at the entire thing from all angles of public safety, from vehicular traffic to counter protesters or folks that could be trying to disrupt things, to protesters that also are pushing the boundaries and maybe turning things in a negative direction. So it really is. It's an incredible tool to be able to have that total picture, to be able to really evaluate it, to make sure that the folks that are out there get to have their voice heard in a safe way, and allows us to intervene when we need to ensure the safety of everyone.
Well, it gives you an early warning, which I think is fantastic. I had a little bit of experience with the drones, about 2007. We did a demo. And I'm just going to tell this quick story to show the importance of this equipment. I'm also a former hazmat team member and on the state regional team that we staff here out of Eugene. And we did a scenario on a rail car, tank car. And what would normally take firefighters suited up in level A entry gear an hour to go in, film, look at the valving, get the UA/NA numbers off the tank car, know exactly what we're dealing with, and get back out, a quarter to a half mile away, would take a solid hour. We could do the same thing with the drone with real-time photos, video, and IR infrared, where we could see heat signature in less than 3 minutes, and no firefighters were put in harm's way. So I think this is fantastic. I think it's a force multiplier, and I'm excited that EPD is doing this. Thank you.
Thank you,
We have
Councilor.
supported hazmat on a few occasions in ways that really helped keep people out of harm's way. It's been fun to be able to see the breadth of missions that we have found useful for the drones across the public safety space here.
Well, as a former fire guy, thank you.
Commissioner Rady?
Yeah, I feel confident that I have been involved in and organized more demonstrations than the rest of this commission put together. And I know there are elements in our community who do not feel comfortable about, for example, a drone monitoring a demonstration. I just want to say, from my perspective as a retired monitor captain, I'm very happy to see the drone up there and the police have as good a view of what is going on as possible. We are demonstrating in public to be seen, so we should have no concerns about that. And threats to a demonstration or to the public are likely to come from beyond the perimeter of the demonstration. And the better the police can see that and the quicker they can respond, knowing what the overall situation is, the better as a demonstration organizer I feel that we are much safer. So that's the only comment.
Thank you. Vice Chair Shivers?
That.
Yeah, I have 3 thoughts. One, I was going to say, like Jack said, having organized these protests myself and worked with EPD on the other side of that, they've been very respectful and have increased the safety of the people that I have called out in ways that I appreciate. They've also managed to do it without the police physical presence, which can be disruptive, especially or triggering to people who don't always have the best experience with cops in general. I was also wondering what because we made this policy back in 2019, and I imagine that it's done well, but could be improved. Kyle, from your perspective, how should the policy be updated? What can we change that will make your life easier?
Well, I certainly think that there's room to articulate and note the DFR program. It is a notable portion or component of the drone program that we have now. While I believe that this policy does authorize and allow us, without too much hiccup, to continue to operate the DFR as it is, because realistically, we're following all of the criteria here. It's just the difference is whether we're flying it in the field with a controller or we're flying it remotely from a computer. In fact, I've got the remote ops up here on my side screen right now, because you can do it from anywhere, which is an amazing part about this.
Sergeant Williams,
But
what's the DFR?
Drone as a first responder.
Thank you.
That's the remotely operated side where we've got the docks that are stationed around town. So I think there's definitely a few components in here, and I would be happy to really dive in and present some changes, especially once we have a better idea of the regulatory and legislative landscape. But I think calling out the DFR, we've started doing a lot more interior work since then. We've had some technology that's coming around that has given us, so we could certainly, there's probably some room to at least document or talk about the interior versus Overwatch and sort of split out some of the tech. But the reality is that it's more the procedural stuff. And I think we'll also be in a better place later this year for the DFR procedures. The 908A for general team procedures are pretty solid. And I'll be honest, I probably need to sit down and go through it with more of a fine tooth comb, specifically to think about more significant changes that might be called out. But certainly the DFR operations, and it's just, the problem is we're just like treading water in quicksand right now, because while sometimes it feels like things are moving very slowly, things are also constantly changing. I believe that once we see where we go with this beyond visual line of sight waiver, that's going to mostly set us up for the foreseeable future. I don't see any big regulatory changes that would dramatically change how or what we're able to do. The big one would be if we can get the altitude pushed up just a little bit, but that's not really a major policy change that would need to be noted in here. So honestly, the policy has worked pretty well for us so far. I've looked at it over the years periodically to see if we're too far off. I mean, one of the silly kind of the little things that I see that, and I think I called this out in the original meeting, was just that we put in here about making sure that, or putting lights and stickers and things on them, and the tech has been a little bit challenging. The reality is that markings can't be seen from 300 or 400 feet up anyway. It looks like a black dot in the sky is the reality. And so some minor adjustments there to just really bring us into compliance. We don't, when we can, we do the red and blue lights. I really like it when we do, because I want everybody to know that's a police drone. We're not trying to hide the vast majority of the time, absent a warrant with a very specific set of circumstances. But otherwise, it really has just worked pretty well. And I think we didn't get too far in the weeds to be super specific on things. And I think that's proven to be useful here, because it allows us a little bit of wiggle room while still giving us the guardrails of where we need to land.
Sergeant Williams, I have a question about 908.13 for data recording. And the reason this pops into my mind is because Police Commission recently spent several meetings digging into the policy for the Guardian trailer and the cameras. Mm-hmm. And so data storage was one of the things that we covered in great detail as far as how long that data is stored for. And 908.13 doesn't give a window of how long this data is stored. Can you tell us about the current storage policy?
We follow established evidence retention policies. And I will tell you, I'm not an expert to be able to tell you how long different things get saved for, but we upload these videos. When we take recordings, we upload them into our evidence.com, and they get tagged just like any other video evidence. So they're going to be tagged with the same crime notations and whatnot to establish how long they're retained for.
And is the drone video also subject to a FOIA request, like any of the other camera systems?
I would assume so. I can't say we've had one yet.
The reason I ask is because
Yeah,
this came up so much with that Guardian trailer with the Guardian camera system, is if somebody is accused of perpetrating a crime and they want to see the footage of that, if that video footage is no longer available, it could jeopardize their case to mount a defense.
Yeah, and we're getting into an area that's not my specialty, so I apologize that I'm a little foggy on some of this. I don't have any basis to believe that this video would be any more protected. Like body worn video is a little bit different. But again, if we have recordings and they get uploaded into evidence, it's saved just like any other evidence. Now, we don't record everything all the time. There are some places that do record. If it's in the air, it's recording. But there's privacy concerns with that also, because we don't necessarily want to be recording everybody all the time and retaining that. So we really do try to, between that and the storage component, we really try to preserve it for when we have an evidentiary purpose or a police liability. We want to capture our actions, or we believe that there's something happening that would provide some level of evidence. And then we would save that, read a report, and upload it.
I'm going to look to my commissioner, who is a defense attorney as well. Commissioner Lyman, can you think of cases where this has come up, or where you see a need to pull drone footage, and with some of the cases that you work with, or actually in any general scenario like that?
Is this for me?
Yes, it is.
Not police drone, I mean, it's possible. I don't think we have the same. I think based on what Sergeant Williams has told us they're doing, I don't think we have those trailers are in prominent downtown locations and in other places. And I think we had, personally for me, that the concerns were higher. But the answer to your question is, other than when being offered by the police as evidence, that does happen. So.
Okay, thank you. Also, I know that we had worked quite a bit, and Chief Skinner has expressed his commitment to an overarching policy that EPD will not use facial recognition software with any of our video equipment. And so I imagine that will also find its way into the policy once the statute has been through the legislature. Sergeant Williams, what is the process for that? Is it going through the House or the Senate? Maybe it's
I'm still trying to
Jordan.
I'm trying to get some clarification on that. It's going to start in the Senate. Senator Brzezinski's carrying the bill forward, and he's going to be presenting it. I don't know exactly kind of what the timeline is. We're trying to get some clarity on that right now. Actually, I met with the chief a couple of days ago, and that was one of our topics of discussion that we're trying to get. And if you notice under 908.4.c, we actually prohibit facial recognition specifically in the drone policy. Being that I was in policy at the time and it had been part of some of the early camera policies for downtown, I proactively plucked that out of another policy and dropped it into this one to just smooth that field. The areas where some AI tech is starting to make its way into drones, facial recognition is tough because really the vantage point and the range, there's not enough detail on 99.9% of what we look at, unless we're specifically zooming in to try to identify if this is a person that matches a description of something that we're looking for. Some of the unique areas that some AI stuff is we're starting to see is just counting people, counting cars, like identifying. There's a new feature out that wasn't working very well. I'm hoping they'll kind of dial it in, where if a person is identified, if a subject is basically seen moving on the screen, it will beep at you. So like when we're on one of these 4-hour SWAT barricade protracted call outs, and it's easy to be distracted and look over here and look over there, and you're not watching the screen every second of multiple hours of doing flights, that if it recognizes that there is a person that comes into that screen, it'll basically ding to alert you, hey, there's something there to look at. But to be able to actually deploy like identifying software that would cross-reference and match and identify a specific person, there's nothing out there available, and really isn't anything we're going to be interested in utilizing anyway for the way that we're using drones, and we're allowed to use drones here.
Okay, thank you for that. Other comments or questions for Sergeant Williams or for Sergeant Jordan, since we have them? It sounds like we won't have a whole lot of definitive action on this until after the legislature reviews and then updates. So do Vice Chair Shivers, do we need to have a motion to table this until it's been reviewed by the legislature?
I think we should just leave it up to chair to reschedule it at that point. We could do a motion, but
then somebody has to keep track of that motion that's been tabled forever.
Yep.
And that would be still the chair. All right.
I'm happy to work with Sergeant Jordan to make sure we get it back to you once we have that clarity. It certainly has been a topic of discussion for me and the chief. And of course, we knew that we were going to need to do a policy review and some changes probably this year. So it's been on our mind anyway, and it would be very easy if you don't bring it up, we can easily bring it up later in the year once we're ready for that. And hopefully at that point I can have a draft policy ready for you guys to take a look at that makes a bunch of these clarifications and changes.
That's great. It's also great that you have the expertise of working with policy for things like that. Now, will the drone as first responder be included in the policy, or would it be a separate policy?
No, that was another big topic of conversation. In some ways, it feels like it should be its own policy, but when you drill down into it, again, it's just another way to fly a drone. And so while there are some changes and there are some procedural differences, policy-wise, I dragged across the country. I reached out to a bunch of my contacts. Nobody has a separate policy for DFR. There are a few agencies that have DFR-related components in their primary policy. Most of them don't even have that. The policy really just covers drone use. And while the DFR is a unique program, it still is drone use, and the policy generally covers that sufficiently. So again, I think making a note that we have the program and some of the legal parameters, or just noting that it will follow standard procedures for drone ops, I think there is room for at least identifying that within the policy. But I don't know what I would say that isn't just copying and pasting 97% of what's in the other one already.
Okay. Now, do you know if Springfield is also working on policy for this, or once that passes through the legislature?
They will have to, because their policy miraculously is very, very, very similar to ours. So they'll
Funny how that
certainly
happens.
I know, right? Well, in mine, I didn't make this all up myself either. So there's and many Oregon agencies around the state will need to make some changes to their policies, and Springfield will too.
Okay. Is there currently any sort of mutual aid policy that deals specifically with drones? I know that last month you had talked to us a little bit about how the two agencies work collaboratively. Is there any specific policy regarding when Springfield or when Eugene has a drone in the air, as far as who's primary, which policies should be followed? It helps that they're remarkably alike.
Yeah, our policies are nearly the same, and we are a metro team, so we have an IGA outlining a very close relationship, more than just a standard MOU of agreement. We operate as a singular team. We have a call out criteria for who gets to be called out when, and sort of if it's a Eugene call, then it defaults to our staff, and then if we need additional, then it goes to Springfield. If it's a Springfield call, they get primary, and then would roll into us. But we have with that metro team IGA, we have a situation where we don't have to. It's expected if there's a call in either city and there's a drone pilot available, they will proactively respond. They do have to ask for their watch commander's approval to go, but the other agency doesn't have to make the request. In most every other specialty, like if Lane County needs a drone, they need to make an official request, and then we could respond yay or nay and respond. With Springfield and our relationship there, my expectations are that if my guys hear a call in Springfield that they could be helpful on, that they start going, and then they make the request to our watch commander to get approval to go to that call. And our watch commanders, by and large, nearly always approve those requests because we want to be helpful to each other, and we routinely crisscross back and forth between us. It's another good reason why our policies are in sync. I'd have to look at those again to see if there is anything different or not. But we train all together, or we really operate as a single team with just the two cities putting employees, staff into it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments for policy 908? Seeing none, Sergeant Williams, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful evening with your family.
You bet. Thank you. And sorry that we're not able to do more work and dive into this. We're just at kind of a unique time to be bringing it forward. So hopefully we can get back to it here later this year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Have a great night.
And you as well. Moving into welfare check, policy 307. The agenda item summary, Police Commission would like to discuss the topic of welfare checks as it relates to law enforcement, as well as review the current welfare check policy number 307. This was an item that had been identified as number 15 on the parking lot items for our work plan. And so they provided us with a copy of the policy 307. Sergeant Jordan, I see highlighted here, it says D 2525. What does that mean for us under effective date?
Okay, I'm muted. And we're talking about the welfare check policy?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that means draft, but if it's the published version, that's when it was revised and adopted, so. So yeah, that should have been the last date of, I'm trying to log back in here just to see what exactly we're looking at. That should be the exact date that we adopted it.
So then this version of the policy that we're looking at was adopted 8 days ago?
Oh, wait, no, sorry. That's actually got any updates we need to it. I forgot you guys got the draft copy, not the one that's published currently, so.
Okay. So then the one that we have right now, this is the draft copy?
Yes.
Okay. Off the top of your head, do you happen to have the highlights of what was changed from the previous version of the policy? I know sometimes we get the red line version.
So with this policy, because it is so simple, we didn't actually change anything substantively. However, we went through and we made sure and did our normal revisions for gender neutral language and ensured that, you know, all of the grammar, all that stuff, formatting was accurate. In this policy, there's the one ORS that's mentioned, and it still governs and is still how we do things. So
307.2, where it says the statute authorizes peace officers to enter or remain on another's premises. Does that mean that the CSOs could also be doing this welfare check in addition to the sworn officers?
Generally speaking, no, that's not going to be, they're not sworn peace officers within the state of Oregon. So it's going to be limited to just sworn officers.
Oh, okay. All right. I see two hands up, but I don't know which one went up first because I wasn't looking at the screen at the time. I'll go with Vice Chair Shivers.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to ask about the role of cahoots, which Jensina sort of is in that area as well. I assume it's the same answer. They're not sworn officers, so they don't get called to these.
They do actually get called to welfare checks as their workload is permitting, but they're going to have a far less invasive role potentially. They're generally not covered under this, where they're not making entry with force if needed, unless there are certain circumstances like, you know, they see a person down who is in immediate need of help. And then as far as I know, that would kind of transition to Good Samaritan type laws that would protect them. But for the actual authority to go in, this is still going to pertain more to us, even though they do go and handle welfare checks. Often people answer the door and they're able to make contact, and it's a really good way for them to, handle the call where it doesn't need a sworn officer to respond. So.
Cool. Glad to hear it. There are enough questions. I have more, but I will pass it on for now.
Commissioner Rady.
Yeah, if you may recall, I asked about riding along with a sergeant. So Saturday I rode along with Sergeant McIntyre and we did a welfare check. And it was I learned a lot from it. Because here they were at the house. Neighbors have reported haven't seen the woman in months. Packages on the front porch. Lights still on, but maybe, E-Webs on auto pay. Do we break in the door? Well, it's a pretty substantial door. I don't want to trash the door, but spent some time going around the house, evaluating the whole situation. Finally decided to go in through the back door, break a window. And as soon as they opened the door, one of them went, uh-oh, it's warm in there. Oh, we know what that means. And the sergeant told me later that on welfare checks, they have about a 25% of the people they check on are found dead. And that was one. It's an interesting thing to do, yes, and a good thing that someone does it.
Thank you for that perspective, Commissioner Rady. Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. I just have some confusion around that last little case site there on your materials that you provided. The Coniglia v. Strom says that the Supremes in the United States said that you can't do this, and then so could you just explain, if you're able to, can you explain our Oregon statute is still valid and that's how we do them? Is that what's going on?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, that is still very valid and still the way we operate.
So do you know is that statement accurate, that 2021 United Supreme Court ruled that governments cannot enter homes without a warrant acting as community caretakers? Is that the law of the land? I know, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you gave us these materials.
Well, I'm actually, yeah, I see that. I actually don't know what material you're referring to because I provided the policies. I'm looking back through to see what was included in this packet that
page 2, well, it says, actually it goes from page 1, the policy 307, to page 15, information about community caretaking case law. I'll look it up. I don't want to waste everyone's time. It confused me when I read the submission. But we're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
That's something that Sergeant Barong had provided to us last time when we discussed this, and I just thought it would be helpful to include that as well.
Well, then Sergeant Jordan should absolutely not have had any kind of response, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Holly, for the explanation, and I'll read the case and figure it out. So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Vice Chair Shivers.
Well, that took out one of my 4 questions. The second one I had was, where do welfare checks fall on the call priority list when it comes into the call center? Essentially, I imagine they're certainly below emergencies. Are they above trespassing, below trespassing? It would be nice if we had the call priority list in front of us, but I didn't think of it before now.
Yeah, that's actually something I would have to dig into because it would be covered under our comm center policies themselves and their sort of procedural stuff. And unfortunately, I don't have that right in front of me at this moment, but I could certainly address that in the future.
And we're talking about budget, and we're talking about how overworked our officers already are. And I know it'd be really easy for welfare checks to fall by the wayside. And maybe there are elements of them that are problematic, as Alan was bringing up earlier. My fourth question was, did you have an answer for that, AIC? Oh, my fourth question was, how do, oh no, I should have written it down. Come back to me.
AIC Burke, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, I actually was referring to Commissioner Rady or whoever's question it was earlier about, actually it was Lyman, I think, about being able to enter into a home on a welfare check. And I think we still can under ORS enter a home if we have reason to believe that someone's hurt or inside or needs assistance. And I think it was Commissioner Rady that gave the example of what occurred during his ride along. So those are the things the officers would have to do when they get there: assess, determine, and then see if they have enough reason to believe that they have to force entry. So I think it is covered under ORS.
Thank you. Vice Chair Shivers?
Yeah, I remembered what my question was. It was if officers in the process of conducting a welfare check find evidence of other crimes, how does that chain of evidence work, and how does that work when it comes to the legal case beyond that?
Well, it's kind of a complex issue, but certainly say we're called for an overdose and we go into a space, that's one of the obvious ones where if somebody is, calling on behalf of somebody else who's in need of immediate medical attention, we're not going to be pursuing things like crimes that are obvious, like drug possession or, that sort of thing. But I think it really depends. I mean, if it's a more serious crime, we're going to have to assess at that point and kind of react accordingly and, work to handle that in the right way. So,
Yeah, my concern would be, there's a meth lab in the house. That's problematic, but if a neighbor called because they really hate this house, they call in a welfare check, and then essentially weaponizing the police against a neighbor they don't like, it gets kind of iffy for me. If it's bodily endangering,
right.
somebody else, it seems a little bit more clear cut, but I appreciate the clarity there.
Yeah.
Chief.
And officers, I have to echo, officers should be doing everything they can to kind of ferret out all of the details and all of the facts. And so before any entry is forced, before anything happens, we should be ensuring that we're asking questions, we're reaching out to hospitals, we're talking to neighbors, we're doing all these other things. And if for some reason it looks like, this isn't what it seemed like when we got here, when we were first dispatched, that's going to change the path of that call and how it's handled.
Chief Burke?
Yeah, to echo also what Sergeant Jordan was saying, that in an answer to, if you go in under the scope of a welfare check and an officer determines that there's another crime outside the scope of how you made entry into a home, the officers would then identify, rather than continuing on, should be applying for an additional search warrant or some other cause to be able to stay or continue or expand the scope of why they're in a residence or wherever they're looking. So.
Thank you for the clarification. Other questions or comments on policy 307? Commissioner O'Neill.
Some brief internet search that maybe Commissioner Lyman is also doing about the Supreme Court case that I'm sure we may hear more about when we review this policy again, but it seems like there is enough nuance that it's really about seizure of property and violations of the Fourth Amendment that the Supreme Court ruled on, and not entering for the need to assist persons who are seriously injured or threatened with such injury. So hopefully that is the first step of getting some clarity on that piece of the submission.
Thank you for the research on that. Vice Chair Shivers?
Yeah, one thing, if you are planning on revising this policy further, one area of concern for me, I really like welfare checks. They've saved people's lives many times. They've also traumatized a number of my friends who were undergoing serious mental health issues at the time. Particularly a situation where the parents call on behalf of their child and the child is undergoing some sort of traumatic psychological experience. I would love to have a little bit more clarity for particularly our newer officers when it comes to how to deal with mental health and the nuances of what to do after they check with the relatives, neighbors, and nearby hospitals. Like what sort of information they will be most helpful to them in asking those questions. That's not necessarily for the community so much as it is for officers, but it would reassure me.
I just want to respond to that real quick. I totally hear what you're saying, and I think that is an important thing for us to factor in, especially when we're training new officers. Sometimes the right response is to find all the information out. Maybe it's connect them with other resources. Maybe it's not conversations with us once we determine that they're not in imminent danger. Maybe it's backing off, and but it just all depends on the facts. But I totally appreciate what you're saying, and I think we can try and revisit that once we're looking at some input for the edits into this. So.
Sergeant Jordan, when the comms receives a call asking for a welfare check, is it always the police that's dispatched for that?
No, not necessarily. Certainly for more serious scenarios where there may be imminent harm to themselves or others, where there is weapons involved, where there are children involved potentially, it's going to change kind of how dispatch handles that. And again, I can't speak to their exact call procedures and protocols off the top of my head, but I know that often cahoots will just be sent out, or an officer will be sent out and make initial contact or work with cahoots to make that initial contact and then bow out once that warm handoff is done. So it really is just dependent on the situation and how severe it is and how dangerous that is.
You know what the process is with the officer arrives and they determine that somebody is actually in crisis, or how is that determination made if somebody is in crisis and needs more help, possibly from Eugene Springfield Fire or from cahoots?
Well, I mean, it's certainly based on how well we're collecting that data as we go into the call. So it's based on data that dispatch provides to us. It's based on data we get from contacting family members or friends, or sometimes we call back the caller and talk to them more, and so those things can kind of steer that a little bit, but we also have other tools in our belt, and we know, say we're met with a person who is going to be a candidate for a peace officer's hold, for instance. They're that much of a danger to themselves, they're not violent, they're not a danger to their community per se, but we need to take that next step because we have a duty to ensure that they are safe. So we may transition to taking them to a hospital. And so kind of it's sometimes they want to accept those resources. And so cahoots is a good route. They can go voluntarily, or sometimes it's less voluntary, but it's not a volatile situation. So based on all that investigation we do and conversations with them, if we can have them, we will try and make sure that we do the correct thing that's going to make the most sense and be the safest for them as well as us.
Another question that doesn't actually necessarily relate directly to this policy. In the case of where the scenario that Commissioner Rady described, where the person was found deceased, how does the death notification process go? Does that initiate with the officer that does the welfare check?
Yes. So essentially, officers always make every attempt to determine who the next of kin is. And we, generally speaking, we won't do notifications over the phone. So say the person lives in town, we will have an officer go speak to that person. If the person lives in another jurisdiction, we will request aid from another agency and say, could you please go out and notify so-and-so about this deceased subject? And we make sure and share information so that people can call with questions, that sort of thing. And I guess the last scenario would be we can't identify next of kin. And so we would the medical examiner would take on that role, and we would ensure that they have all the details we have. And so that way we can make sure they can try and find family wherever they are.
Thank you. One last question. Is an officer allowed to pronounce death? Or does there need to be an EMT or somebody to do that?
Well, generally speaking, we have medics pronounce death. However, sometimes it's very obvious, and if medics aren't there yet, we're going to notify dispatch ahead of time. And I think that time would be kind of noted in our call details and used for medical purposes by the ME.
Sergeant Jordan, would you be able to speak briefly about the TIP volunteers and their role in death notifications?
Yes, so I haven't worked extensively with them, but we do. I guess I would say also Cahoots and TIP have been helpful in the past delivering death notifications. TIP volunteers are a great tool to have. They're volunteers who come out and will handle that sort of conversation with family members. It can be kind of emotional and takes a little bit of an extra kind of care. And so we do rely on them often for death notifications or really stressful kind of sudden events in people's lives. So
I've met with the folks at CHIP a couple of times, and I'm very impressed with the services that they offer, and especially how much of that weight they can take off of that first responder that ends up being hit with things like entering the warm house and it becoming very apparent that someone is deceased.
mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments, feedback on policy 307? Sergeant Jordan, did you say that it's currently in iteration right now, or is this draft ready for us to vote on?
It's ready for you to vote on at this point. There really weren't many changes or any that we saw that needed to be made other than that reformatting and gender neutral language. So, yeah.
All right. Then I'm looking for a motion to approve policy 307 as presented to us this evening. Commissioner Rady?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. All in favor of approving policy 307, say aye or raise your hand for the camera. And any opposed, please say no. And do we have any abstentions?
Yeah, I'm abstaining because the materials tell me something I have to read the case, but so thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lyman. And Sergeant Jordan, let me just double check that this policy
Abstain.
is, thank you, Commissioner Parham. Let me just double check that this policy is actually only one page. We're not missing anything on it.
Nope, you're accurate. It's just one page.
Okay, just double checking. All right, then that passes. And then we will go into, we can go into closing comment, and I believe we have someone to provide public comment this evening. I'd like to move public comment up before closing comments. Can I get a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? No opposition, no abstention. Holly, for our public comment, can you please promote them to panelist?
Yes, I was able to allow them to talk, so hopefully they will be on here in just a moment.
Okay.
Just need to unmute.
Former Commissioner Silver Mogart, I believe, is joining us this evening for public comment.
Just give them a minute to get unmuted.
We certainly weren't planning to move through the agenda this quickly. Poor guy probably thought he had plenty of time. Holly, when an attendee is unmuted, can they still raise their hand to let us know when they're ready to speak?
I would think so, yes. And I just promoted them to panelists too. So hopefully, oh, here we go.
Okay.
We have
we
someone
have a-
else we have someone else in the meantime, that is wanting to make public comment. Would you like to go first with
Yes,
that
please.
person?
Is
Okay.
that Kim?
Yes.
All right, Kim, welcome to Eugene Police Commission. We'd love to hear your comment.
Hello. So I am an advocate for the unhoused people, and over the last week I have been getting complaints about EPD officers coming out. In particular, it's Officer Stramler, Doggett, and Officer Pizzola. These officers have a reputation with people on the streets. They are coming out and giving people trespassing tickets in extreme weather events, including last night, this morning, and all day today, telling people they need to leave or they will be arrested. They are giving them trespass tickets. And it's like it's freezing cold, and these people are just trying to survive. And these 3 officers are coming out and they are harassing them. They are using abuse of authority. Like, it's so inhumane and it's so gross. And I'm so sad and I'm just so upset, and I'm just hoping somebody will listen, because these people are struggling, and I believe what these police officers are doing are illegal. And I have filed so many complaints with the police auditors. The police auditors will say, yeah, there's something wrong here. They send it to EPD, and then EPD Sergeant Salo gets a hold of me and says, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong going on here. But there is. Like, even the police auditors are saying these things need investigated, and these police officers are, I mean, it's not just during cold weather events, it's all year long that they're doing this. And they're also like targeting unhoused people's advocates. People are doing outreach. I've been ticketed 8 times just for helping people during weather events, during sweeps. I just got a ticket again on Monday. I'm just, yeah.
Thank you for bringing that to the police commission. And you said that you have spoken with the independent police auditor's office about this as well?
Yeah, multiple times.
All right, thank you so much for bringing that to us. I know that the independent police auditor will, Mark, I see you on camera. And so thank you for bringing that up to us at public comment. Mark, did you have a comment? You're muted again, sir. Whatever magic you did at the beginning of the meeting, do that again. Oh, we can't hear you, Mark. Can't read the note either. Darn it. Holly Matthews will, I believe Holly will be able to follow up with you, Kim.
Mark, your phone is muted. The symbol is a muted phone rather than your speaker on your computer.
Let me see if
There should be a button in the lower left-hand corner of.
no, we still don't have you. There.
Okay. I thought Holly muted me after I finished my last round.
Did you want to provide a response to the public comment that Kim gave us, or do you want to follow up after the meeting? And now you're muted again.
I think Holly has to unmute me. I may be wrong.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay. We often get complaints about officers issuing trespassing citations. It's one of our more, probably the mode of complaints that we get. But if it's the policy of the city and it's the laws of the city, and the officers are directed to enforce those laws, it's not misconduct by the police officers. It's now that the case can go to the courts, but the decision to cite someone is not in and of itself misconduct unless it's a violation of constitutional rights. I think we all have our own moral and ethical compass in terms of whether we think that's the right thing to do. But in terms of the legal thing to do, if there's laws on the books that allow the officers to do that, and both at the municipal level and the state level, then it's not an allegation of misconduct. It's the officer discretion, if you will. And again, I suspect that it's complaint-based, because most of the responses that EPD do are complaint-based. And again, I'm sorry for the things that she has gone through and others have gone through, but it is the policy of the city to enforce the laws if there's probable cause to believe that the laws have been broken.
Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Chair. It would be helpful to know if these trespass citations are for private property or public property, because there's a delineation between those two. You know, private property is triggered by the property owner that wants people moved off their property. And I don't think police have a lot of discretion on that. Public property is a little different. There's some ORS that comes into play there. The state, in its wisdom, codified the Johnson versus Grants Pass case and parts of the Boise versus Martin versus Boise. And then the Supreme Court overruled that, and the state, though, had codified it. So we're still responsible for that. But if it's private property, that's in a whole different arena. Isn't that correct, Chief Burke?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Kim, did you have additional comment?
It looks like she does. Do you want to entertain that now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so here's the thing. Some of it is private property, some of it is public property. When I just got ticketed on Monday, the police officers, I use a app called Regrid, which tells me all of the boundary lines. Before I even got out of my car on Monday, I went and I pulled up my Regrid app, and it said that the address was unavailable. The police officers told me it's owned by Portland and Western Railroad. I went into Portland and Western Railroad, and I talked to two of the people in the office, and they told me that they did not call and trespass these people, that they don't do that, and that they appreciated what I was doing. I also have, and to keep doing it, I also have several hours of video footage of these three police officers following me around and coming and harassing the people that I'm trying to help. Like, I have so much video footage of these guys just harassing us. Like, and also, like, why are they going out and doing, like, they're using trespass as a way to sweep people so that they can get around the extreme weather event rules. Does that make sense? Like, I get that people are trespassing on private property, but in extreme weather events, is there not a way that they can just chill out and let people survive while we get through the ice storm? That's it.
And we'd love to see your videos. And again, I appreciate the dilemma and the compassion that you have. However, if they're directed to enforce those laws, then they will be enforcing those laws. And if there's a trespass letter on file, which there are probably at least hundreds, if not more, for a property, then normally they have a legal right to issue citations for those trespassing things. And as you know, as well as I know, we've had this same issue for decades. It was an issue when I first came on board with the city in 2009, 16 years later, still an issue, and I'm sure it was an issue well before 2009. And it's really regrettable that there aren't more solutions. But in terms of officer misconduct, again, we'd be more than happy to look at the things that you have. But I suspect that I know that there's a team that's out there that assists in both private property and public property in enforcing trespassing laws. And when they're directed to do so, they will do so.
The time for public comment for Kim is up. Public commenters have 3 minutes. And so former Commissioner Mogart, I see you've joined us.
Hey, hello. Thank you guys for
Welcome back.
yeah, if only briefly. Weird seeing Mark here, and good to see Kyle earlier. I'm calling in today to discuss the sanctuary status of our law enforcement officers and the way that we kind of discussed already a few things about some of the different issues that people from my community from coming in today as the president of LULAC. Main concerns that we have, and I know you had a discussion about this at the beginning of the meeting today, but being told that we have ordinances and policies in place is not enough. And there's a lot of concern coming from my community. There's a lot of fear regarding even being out in public. So, we'd like to know from the chief and from the commission what our rights are, and if law enforcement officers are going to be involved in taking part in any of the different enforcement from federal agencies, from ICE, if there's going to be any kind of involvement with traffic perimeters, traffic stops, federal immigration laws or orders, and allowing to getting access to government services without being asked about your immigration status. So that's why I'm here today, to ask that we get some real solid information about what's being put into place from our community for my community.
Thank you for expressing that, Mr. Mogart. AIC Burke, would you like to respond, or save that for the chief to respond when he returns?
I can respond in short. Understanding the concerns from the community based on the narratives and what's going on around the nation. I can just say that I can give assurances that we train our officers, and we don't or we abide by the policy and the ordinances, not only the state but the local ordinances, and our policy to not report and interact with those types of affairs. So just an assurance that we are doing that, and that we're here to protect our community, and that's everybody in the community. And to back that up, I was in preparation for Human Rights Day and sat on a panel for that, and looked at and researched and looked for data, and there's no data of our involvement at all with any of these type of enforcements going back as far as I looked 5 years, but there's nothing going back further ever since these policies go into effect. So I hope that I can give at least a verbal assurance to that effect. So
thank you for that. We'll go into closing comments. Councilor Yang.
No comments. Thank you, Chair.
Councilor Groves.
No comments, just pleased to be a part of this group. Thank you.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Councilor Groves. Thank you, Cindy, and the auditor, and Human Rights Commissioner Bradley. Thank you for hanging in there. Chief Burke, nice to meet you and see you on the call. Sergeant Jordan, excuse me. Thank you. Only comment I wanted to make is that I don't think Sergeant Williams intended this, but he kind of hit an issue that, we never thought it would happen with fire. It did. It was successful. He talked about this drone thing being completely integrated with Springfield and the ability to work. And I sat there and thought, Metro Police Department, and it's maybe 10 years, 20 years, but it absolutely could happen in this community. And as our council discusses where to find the money to fund fire adequately and public safety, it's a discussion that should take place, should take place, and the drone, the cooperation discussion that we heard, tonight, anecdotally, just kind of hit that for me. So, everyone have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal?
Yeah, I'll just, the only thing I'll say is for Kim, who commented that I'm on the Civilian Review Board and work with interim auditor, and it is a challenge to navigate the line between what is a violation of policy and what is something that tugs at our hearts and our compassion. And it does sound like the auditor is, trying to communicate that effectively, which is great. That being said, I think it is worth, continually revisiting how we manage our police resources and how we deal with public safety as a community and how we approach individuals who are unhoused and really challenging weather events. And I don't have any answers, but that we did hear that, and it is a part of our conversation continuing. So thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Commissioner Bradley?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Rady?
Yeah, I would just like to note that in the last week, there have been 2 more instances of Eugene police taking into custody deranged individuals with firearms. And in neither case was anybody shot. And we just have to constantly remind ourselves that asking officers to do that is asking a very great deal. And I would hope that some way the department, the city, or this commission would find a way to publicize this and honor those officers who do things like that, which is putting themselves at risk to keep everyone safe. And that's something I would just like to know. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Parham?
No comment at this time.
Thank you. Vice Chair Shivers?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge Kim's comments and frustration with a system that does not seem to listen very well, especially when you don't know exactly who you should talk to or how you should phrase it so that group can listen and respond in an effective way. For me, what those comments made me think of was not it was the debate around private property and what role we want cops to have when it comes to protecting people's private property, because I think that system is maybe not ideal, but it's working well enough. So for me, the question is one of prioritization. Is this what we want our underfunded and overworked police department working on? And I would argue that we have more than enough needs, that we don't need to be fulfilling out trespass orders unless there's specific harm being conducted to the community or the surrounding area. I don't know the exact situation. This body isn't one where that's appropriate for us to discuss, but as a community member, I would like to see the prioritization on things that affect more people. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I have no closing comments this evening other than welcome Councilor Groves. Thank you to Interim Police Auditor Gissner, AIC Chief Burke, Sergeant Williams, Commissioner Bradley from Human Rights Commission, always Sergeant Jordan and Cindy Pullman. Thank you and have a wonderful evening, everybody. We are disbanding 35 minutes early. You're welcome.
Night.